Discovered the unexpected reason my son dreaded returning home. It left me amazed and transformed. Linda stood at the kitchen sink, bubbles from the washed dishes slipping between her fingers. With college finally out for the summer, she had been counting the days until Ethan returned. Yet as she looked out the window, her heart sank. The driveway, a barren stretch of gravel, remained empty. The unmistakable warmth of summer had begun to settle on rural Ohio, but inside her chest, a cold knot tightened, surging with unvoiced worries. Her once vibrant son seemed like a ghost of the child she knew, a shadow lurking in their home. She felt the silence wrapped around him like a heavy shroud, chilling her spirit to the bone. When Ethan finally pulled into the driveway, there was a hollowness in his smile that sent jolts of anxiety coursing through her veins. Gone was the light-hearted banter and playful laughter that used to fill their home. Now, questions hung in the air like freshly dried laundry, stiff, heavy, and desperate for connection. "How was your first year?" she would ask, only to be met by distant eyes that shifted away, as if the very mention of school pricked an unseen wound. The lingering silence spread between them, growing more daunting each passing day. With every meal they shared, she felt her fear morph into a choking silence, pressing down on her, leaving her breathless. What had happened to Ethan during his time away? The thought of him facing struggles alone tore at her insides like jagged glass. Her instincts screamed, urging her to pull him closer, to grasp the remnants of their bond before it slipped through her fingers entirely. One evening, while scrubbing the plates, she overheard him speaking with a neighbor. Her heart raced as she strained to catch snippets of their conversation. "I dread coming home," Ethan whispered, his voice heavy with an emotion that felt foreign to her. "It's so hard to enjoy it when I remember what I've seen families struggling to make ends meet. I think about my friends whose parents lost everything." The words struck Linda like a slap in the face, awakening a familiar urgency within her, one she had felt on the day Ethan was born. Suddenly it all clicked. His avoidance, his sorrow, it wasn't about her. It was about the weight of the world resting on young shoulders that were too small to bear it. Memories of her own struggles surged forward, the sacrifices, the late nights spent balancing bills against her dreams for him. A rush of pride mixed with shame washed over her as she realized the depths of her son's heart. Here he was, fighting for a purpose deeper than their daily fight for survival. "Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen." Now let's continue. As she stood there, realizing the ambition burning within him, her heart swelled. Ethan wanted to create something for others, educational resources for kids who mirrored him, trapped in difficult homes. At that moment, hope began to spark within her gloom. She could support him in this mission. Yet, the nagging fear of inadequacy clawed at her. Could she truly help him succeed when their own financial strain loomed large? What if they failed? Their shared mission breathed life back into their fractured relationship, each day spent planning, each struggle traversed together, yet with each advancement came a fresh wave of doubt. As a sudden setback hit them like a brick wall, the urgency of the moment unraveled the fabric of their progress. Faced with uncertainty and overwhelming pressure, Linda could only wonder as they stood at the brink of something much larger, not just for themselves, but against a world that felt stacked against them. Could they rise to the occasion, or would their dreams dissipate along with their hopes? The next day, the bright sun streamed through the kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes dancing lazily in the air. Linda found herself restless, her mind racing with the determination to reclaim the connection with Ethan that she desperately craved. She surveyed the space around her, an ordinary kitchen, filled with the smell of brewed coffee and fresh bread, yet it felt fraught with unspoken words and missed opportunities. She needed to approach this venture with intention and clarity. This wasn't merely about improving their home environment. It was about igniting both their passions in a way that could create a profound impact on lives beyond their own. She began listing potential project ideas on a notepad left on the counter, each penned word bringing with it a surge of determination, a tangible step toward transformation. As the days rolled on, Linda encouraged Ethan to let loose his ideas, to articulate his vision without fear of judgment. She suggested they explore the concept of creating online content videos highlighting the stories of families facing hardship and sharing practical solutions derived from their own experiences. They could document their journey, showcasing how they learned to rise above challenges, not only for themselves but for others who needed hope. Ethan's eyes flickered with cautious excitement. "I just don't know how to get started," he admitted one afternoon, seated at the small kitchen table, his brow creased with uncertainty. Her instinct told her to comfort him, to smooth over his worries with platitudes, but Linda sensed that what he needed was more than encouragement, he needed a plan. "Let us break it down," she proposed, her voice steady. "What expertise do you have? What do you already know?" His fingers drummed on the table, igniting an internal debate. "I know about financial management from my economics class, and how to write a proper budget. I could also share tips about preparing healthy meals on a budget." The skeletal outline of a plan began to form, each piece encouraging a discussion that was both collaborative and revealing. Over the next weeks, they built their foundation layer by layer. They studied successful YouTube channels together, analyzed their content, their presentation styles, and the narratives they crafted. Linda felt her fear begin to dissipate, replaced by a newfound resolve. She would help him refine his ideas, create structure, and even step into the role of co-host. Their roles began to intertwine, her organizational skills balanced by his youthful vision, but the external pressures began to loom just as large as their internal progress. Bills piled on the kitchen counter, a consistent reminder of their financial strife, the cold specter of instability whispering doubts in her ear. One afternoon, as they sat together in front of a laptop, brainstorming video ideas, Linda paused. "What if we don't get enough views? What if we fail?" Ethan's gaze turned solemn. "It's a risk we have to take, Mom. It's not about the number of views, it's about the impact we can create. I want to help kids like me." His conviction reaffirmed her own determination yet enhanced the tension hanging between hope and the implications of potential failure. The sense of urgency clawed at her chest. She realized just how vital this venture was, not just to contribute to their financial survival, but to collectively address their emotional dislocation. They would need to face the uncertainties together, but the underlying fear of not succeeding loomed over them, heavy and oppressive. As they filmed their first video, a clumsy, heartfelt introduction to their channel, Linda felt her heart race. The camera had the potential to expose not only their aspirations but also their vulnerabilities. What they recorded would become their shared legacy, or an unsettling reminder of their effort as futility. With mounting anticipation and a tinge of dread, she thought of the world waiting on the other side of that screen. In the quiet moments after filming, as they reviewed their take, the enormity of what they were undertaking sunk in. Neither of them could predict the response, but what if this was the tipping point for both their futures? With the pulse of determination beating steadily in her chest, Linda set her jaw, knowing that they had embarked on a path filled with possibility and peril. Would this choice bring them together or drive them further apart in their shared pursuit of a purpose? The moment approached. They could no longer back away, their fate was sealed. But as the video edited into its final form, Linda's anxiety shifted into something more primal. Could they truly make a difference, even in the face of the unknown? As the days passed after filming, the anticipation weighed heavy on Linda's shoulders. Each morning began with a ritual of checking their channel statistics, views, likes, comments, like a countdown to validation. Their first video had garnered a modest response, a mix of praise and constructive feedback that left both exhilarated and anxious. This was a stark departure from the usual monotony of their lives. They had stepped onto an unpredictable stage. Linda felt the gap between expectation and reality widen. Ethan was buoyed by the initial reception, but for her, it magnified her insecurities. She found herself questioning her voice on screen. Was she really cut out for this endeavor? The fragile threads of hope they had woven now felt burdened by self-doubt. She channeled this tumult of emotions into planning their next move. A pivotal moment came when she realized the importance of establishing a clear narrative for their content, a unique angle that they could cultivate into a theme for their channel. What stories did they want to tell? What lessons did they want to impart? This question loomed as a beacon amid the swirling uncertainties. One evening, Linda retrieved a box from the attic, a box containing remnants of her past, crumpled notes, and photographs of better times. As she sifted through its contents, she stumbled upon an old journal, filled with her thoughts during a particularly challenging period of her early adulthood. It struck her how much she had grown since then, and how those writings reflected a determination she had almost forgotten. This realization ignited a spark of creativity. "What if we share our stories?" Linda proposed to Ethan over dinner that night. The flicker of candles illuminated his face, revealing the spark in his eyes. "Not just about money and meals, but about our experiences. The struggles, the triumphs, what we've learned." Ethan's enthusiasm peaked. "We can create a series around that. Real stories, real moments, real change." In that moment, a new vision crystallized between them, rich with possibilities. Linda could feel the threads of connection strengthening, woven with the fabric of vulnerability and sharing. It was a profound reminder that they were not merely content creators. They were storytellers, voice to those who felt unheard. However, as they prepared to dive deeper, Linda's mind churned with that familiar shadow of doubt. What if their stories exposed them too vividly? Would it invite judgment or ridicule? The fear whispered ominously, tempting her to retreat into a safer existence. But facing the camera had already begun to thaw her inhibitions. Memories of her younger self, ambitious, fiery, flickered like an ember in her heart. She sensed an unexpected resilience rising within her, a fierce need to share and connect. Together, they mapped out episodes, days spent reminiscing, sharing laughter and tears over family meals, tales of struggles turned to triumphs. They would utilize the engagement from their first video to craft questions for their audience, encouraging them to share their stories. Linda envisioned a rich tapestry of human experience. Every entry would embrace imperfections and reflect authenticity. Yet, that evening as she sat polishing their script, a wave of anxiety washed over her. In becoming so exposed, would they really connect? Could they withstand the scrutiny of sharing their lives with the world? What if vulnerability didn't lead to connection, but left them isolated, stripped bare? With reservations swirling, she pushed her thoughts aside, focusing instead on the excitement of unforeseen creativity. Yet, as they pressed forward in preparation, an alarming tension gripped Linda's heart and impending confrontation loomed. Just as they had begun to trust in their journey, an unwelcome figure from her past appeared at the edge of her memory, a haunting presence wrapped in unresolved conflict. Would this old wound threaten the fragile progress she and Ethan had made, or could confronting their truths lead to deeper healing? The very foundations of their plans teetered as she wrestled with an internal struggle of vulnerability versus protection, pulling her toward a looming confrontation she couldn't yet fully comprehend. With the dawn of a new week, Linda felt the weight of her unresolved past pressing heavily upon her. Each day, the familiar echo of Ethan's encouragement rang in her ears, but the specter of old wounds haunted her, disrupting her focus. The anticipation for their upcoming series now felt entwined with an anxiety she could hardly shake, and the voice of uncertainty grew louder. In preparation for their first storytelling episode, Linda immersed herself in their narrative structure, striving to weave threads of her past into what they could share. But just as she began to navigate the delicate intricacies of authenticity, memories of confrontation cropped up, persistent and merciless. It had been years since she had seen Mark, the figure from her past, the one whose ghost lingered in the recesses of her mind. His unresolved presence was a tether holding her back, a reminder of unmet challenges. What if he reaches out? She pondered, staring blankly at the blank document on her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keys, not yet ready to spill out the words of her past. For years, she had painted her experiences in broad strokes, carefully avoiding the finer details that might reveal pain or weakness. What if this new venture forced those details to surface? Ethan, oblivious to her internal war, animatedly discussed the framing of their first episode over breakfast. His enthusiasm was infectious, but the thought of Mark dampened her excitement. Watching his animated gestures, Linda realized that her struggle against personal demons could jeopardize their collective progress. "I've been thinking," she ventured, her voice wavering slightly, "about how much of my story I want to share." Ethan stopped mid-sentence, his brow furrowing in concern. "What do you mean?" "We've talked about this. It's about connecting with everyone, being real, right?" "Yes, but—" Linda hesitated. "How real?" "There are parts of my story that hold some heavy emotions, Ethan. It isn't just about the surface issues, it runs much deeper. And honestly, the thought of sharing some of it makes me feel physically ill." She saw a flicker of understanding wash over Ethan's face. He reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "You're stronger than you think, Linda. That's what makes your story so powerful. It's those raw moments that will resonate with others." But could she withstand that rawness? The idea of exploring her past, particularly her relationship with Mark, felt like stepping into a maelstrom. Could she emerge unscathed? Was this part of her personal journey, the unraveling of her history, essential to their mission? Driven by this internal conflict, she made a decision. They would film the episode focusing on some general aspects of relationship challenges without diving into specifics about Mark. This didn't send her into deeper trepidation, but instead felt like a strategic step forward, a way to share without fully disrobing her heart. Vulnerability didn't have to translate into exposure. Perhaps she could find strength in boundaries. Later that week, amidst the whirlwind of filming, Linda felt her skin electric with both her decision and the exposure of their stories. They recorded, gauging reactions to their personal narratives and asking viewers to share their truths, and Linda found herself weaving magic in their authenticity. Yet, with every take, flashes of Mark's face invaded her thoughts, his voice clawing at the edges of her caution. It all culminated on the day of filming, as they prepared to go live with their first episode. Standing in front of the camera, the nerves prickled. She reminded herself of the courage she found within old journal pages. But out of nowhere, her heart raced at an unexpected message notification on her phone. A name she hadn't seen for years, an invitation to confront the past she had been avoiding. Was this the sign that she needed to finally face Mark, to uncover the truths she'd buried deep? Or would it throw her into turmoil just as she was finding her voice again? The moment had arrived when she would have to decide. Retreat from this familial confrontation one more time, or embrace an opportunity for personal growth. Linda stared at the glowing screen of her phone, her breath quickening. The message was straightforward yet loaded. Mark was reaching out. Despite the fear curling like tendrils around her mind, it also sparked a flicker of curiosity. Was this truly an invitation to a reckoning, or merely an echo of her past? The first episode would go live soon. At that moment, the prospect of confrontation was both daunting and invigorating. She felt a pulse of urgency. If she didn't confront this head-on, the specter of Mark would continue to haunt her. Would trusting herself with these emotions lead to liberation, or only amplify her fears? "Linda, are you ready?" Ethan's voice broke through her haze, grounding her. She glanced at him, eyes searching for reassurance. His brow was marred with mild concern, yet his inherent optimism radiated through. "I don't know." She carefully crafted her words, as if trying to gauge the weight of each one. "I just received a message from Mark." The brief silence that followed felt oppressive. She could almost feel the air shift as Ethan processed this new information, and for a fleeting moment, she regretted sharing. "Wow," he finally said, his voice steady. "Are you okay?" "I thought I was. I thought I could handle the storytelling without diving into, well, that part of my life." Her thoughts spiraled, wrestling with the idea of being vulnerable yet again. "But maybe this is a sign that I need to face it. To understand it." "I think you should," Ethan replied, his tone encouraging yet cautious. "But you have to decide on your own terms. When is the right time for you?" The tension in the air was palpable, and Linda took a moment to consider all the meaning behind her memories and emotions. What did confronting Mark truly mean? Would it be an act of reclamation or simply a painful stumble into an old abyss? She realized this invitation could either empower her or drain the little confidence she had gained. As the live broadcast approached, she felt increasingly tethered to her choices. The day dawned bright and clear, mocking the turmoil within. "You're about to open Pandora's box," a disembodied voice in her head whispered. Standing in front of the camera, she could feel the collective energy of anticipation from the viewers, both anonymous and familiar. What stories would they share? What would she reveal? As Ethan began hosting the episode, Linda's focus shifted momentarily to him. He was in his element, a subtle reminder that she wasn't alone in this. Still, all the while, she sensed Mark's shadow woven through her thoughts, a constant reminder of unfinished business. She spoke about relationships, dynamics, and the importance of suitable boundaries as they encourage viewers to relate their experiences. The conversation flowed, but each shared narrative seemed to awaken a deeper part of herself, the part that craved resolution. Yet, confronting the audience felt like dancing on the edge of a cliff. They were receptive, opening up about their stories, but each revelation led Linda to question whether she was truly prepared to peel back her layers. And then, her phone buzzed again, an inconsiderate interruption that sent an electric jolt through her. Ignoring it felt impossible. Stealing a glance, she saw Mark's name once more. A simple query, "Can we talk?" In that moment, every ounce of her resolve seemed to shatter. The camera, the audience, her professional ambition, they faded into the background as the tumult of her past surged forward, drowning her in unresolved feelings. She had a decision to make: let this moment dictate her next move or forge ahead in her professional journey, resilient despite the shadows. As she debated internally, the camera zoomed in closer, and she could see the viewer count rising. What would this mean for the stories she had boldly shared? She was balancing on the precipice, teetering between bold choices and the haunting echoes of her history. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her unresolved past pressing heavily upon her once more. Would she embrace Mark's overture? Or would the light of her new path shine brightly enough to cast him away? The moment of truth lingered in the air, heavy and indiscernible, as she realized the decision loomed, and the consequences would shape not just her story, but her identity. What she would discover next could either define her or box her in. With a sinking feeling, she knew conflicts would rise again, forcing her towards clarity or chaos. How would she navigate it all? The camera was still rolling, and her heart raced with apprehension. The world was watching, and so was fate. Ethan's voice faded as Linda's mind plunged deeper into contemplation, the noise of the live broadcast becoming a distant hum. Each heartbeat felt like a drum urging her to make a choice. The flickering light of the camera became a mirror reflecting her tangled thoughts. Mark's message gnawed at her. It felt less like a call from a person and more like a siren song, pulling her back into the stormy seas of her memories. She had spent years crafting an image of strength and resilience, but now, standing on the brink of vulnerability, her resolve felt fragile, like glass about to shatter. "Linda, are you with me?" Ethan's voice broke through her reverie, and his patient gaze anchored her momentarily. "I'm sorry," she whispered, forcing herself to focus. "It's just Mark." "I get it," Ethan replied, yielding the space for her concerns. "But this is your platform, your moment. If you want to address Mark or not, that's your decision. Just breathe." His words were a lifebuoy in the tumultuous ocean of her emotions. Reclaiming her narrative meant more than merely choosing to engage with him. It was about embracing her own journey, both the triumphs and the scars. As she gathered her composure, Linda glanced at the viewers' comments scrolling across the screen. They reflected a plethora of emotions, mirroring her internal chaos: sympathy, curiosity, a sense of shared experience. Did they understand the complexity of confronting someone from her past? Suddenly, a flood of clarity washed over her. Mark's request wasn't a call to regress but an opportunity to redefine her boundaries, an act of empowerment, not submission. But how would she articulate that to an audience eager for authenticity? Taking a deep breath, she decided. She would weave her choice into the episode, discussing how confronting past relationships shapes growth, the essence of her series. "Before we delve deeper," she finally announced, her voice steadying, I want to talk about the power of boundaries, particularly when it comes to our past. Sometimes, the ghost of someone we've left behind can intrude on our present. Ethan nodded in appreciation. That's a great pivot. What's on your mind? Linda hesitated, but discussing her story felt less like dredging up old wounds and more like crafting a narrative of self-discovery. It's important to confront the shadows that linger, she began, the connection with her audience weaving stronger. I received a message from someone who represents a different chapter in my life, and I have the choice to either let that influence my narrative or take charge of it. Expressing her struggle openly ignited a spark in the chat, with viewers sharing their own stories of past relationships and the weight of unresolved issues. The interaction brought an unforeseen rush of empowerment, a collective recognition that faced shadows could lead to growth rather than despair. The funny thing is, she continued, it's easy to want to bury those past relationships or run from them, but that reaction can keep us in cycles of fear. Confronting them can release us. Your stories matter, and so does reclaiming your voice. As she spoke, she felt barriers within herself dissolve. The camera no longer intimidated her, it became a bridge. Empowered by the sharing, she was reminded that vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was the path to strength. But beneath this wave of momentum loomed Mark's unanswered message, a reminder of her unfinished business. The camera's light no longer felt like scrutiny, it felt like a spotlight illuminating a path she was beginning to forge. Reach out, share your stories. Let us explore together how we reclaim our narratives. And yes, I will face Mark. Not as a victim, but as someone determined to shape her future. With each word, Linda sensed new strength coursing through her. The decision settled in her chest, solidifying her future trajectory, one of resilience. Yet as the broadcast came to a close and the adrenaline surged, an unsettling realization emerged. Confronting Mark would not simply be a conversation. It would challenge everything she thought she had laid to rest. As the final moments drew near, anticipation rippled through her. What awaited her with that call? The walls she had begun to dismantle might be ready to crumble fully, inviting new clarity or deeper chaos. She glanced at her phone again, Mark's message still lingering at the top. The moment had arrived. The truths she would confront went beyond him. It lay in discovering who she had become in his shadow. The show ended, but her heart raced with more than just the thrill of performance. A gnawing urgency echoed within her. She had to decide when or if she would respond to him. Would she fortify her newfound strength, or would the past continue to haunt her? With resolve brewing but uncertainty nipping at her heels, Linda realized her journey had only just begun. Would her next step affirm her empowerment, or tether her to her history? The future was unwritten, and the choices ahead loomed heavy as she prepared to step beyond the digital stage and into her reality. The air felt heavier as Linda stood in the quiet of her empty apartment, the echo of her broadcast still reverberating in her mind. Each moment stripped away like layers of paint, leaving her exposed and raw. She had embraced vulnerability in front of her audience, yet the thought of confronting Mark loomed larger than any live stream could convey. Pacing through the dimly lit room, she stopped at the window, the city outside pulsating with life, oblivious to her inner tumult. A stark realization hit her. This was far more than a conversation with Mark. It was a confrontation with the self she had constructed, a self that had flourished in independence but was now quietly shaken by the shadows of her past. Linda turned inward, dissecting her intentions. What was she truly afraid of? Was it the fear of regression, or the fear of associating her current self with the person she used to be? Either way, she sensed the stakes were high. The emotional triggers Mark unearthed from her past had potential to uproot the hard-earned progress she had achieved. Those long nights of introspection had fostered resilience. They felt like a foundation under her feet, now rickety and unsteady. Subconsciously, she began scrolling through her contacts and stopped on Mark's name. The screen lingered as if waiting for her to take charge, to shape the narrative, to reclaim the power that came from choice. Yet a cold wave of doubt washed over her. What if their interaction unearthed buried shame? What if it pulled her back into cycles of self-doubt? Sitting on the plush armchair, she closed her eyes and envisioned the conversation. "What do you want from me, Mark?" she would ask, holding the power of the moment. Within this vision, she practiced asserting her boundaries, a skill she had recently unearthed. This was about her present, her autonomy. Why shouldn't she dictate the terms of their exchange? She felt a flicker of determination, an ember glowing against the tumultuous waves of uncertainty. The tension of revisiting emotional territory that once felt so deeply familiar began to morph into an opportunity for discovery. Rather than a descent into vulnerability, what if this became an ascent towards her authentic self? The deeper she dived into her thoughts, the more the fear transformed into curiosity. Mark had been a significant, albeit painful, part of her story. Would confronting him serve as a closure, a way to glean insights into herself and the choices she had made? This was not merely personal resolution, it was professional development, an opportunity to model resilient behavior on a broader scale. With freshly ignited resolve, Linda jotted down some points on her notepad. A few pages in, her list morphed from statements of fear to declarations of intention. "I will not allow the past to define me," she wrote. "I am not here to be reconciled but to reclaim my growth." Her mind began to race, and adrenaline surged as new perspectives surfaced. Confronting Mark could very well unravel deeper understandings of her own vulnerabilities. Would it reveal layers of wisdom she had yet to comprehend? Was her journey of self-discovery waiting for this very moment? As dawn approached, a soft light spilled through her window, illuminating her realization. This wasn't just about confronting Mark. It was about acknowledging the parts of herself she had overlooked. New possibilities emerged for her future as she embraced the unsettling task ahead. Fueled by a sense of purpose, she stood up, straightened her posture, and looked once more at her phone. Today would be the day she reached out, a defining moment not only for her relationship with Mark but for her sense of self. Then came the calm before the storm. The choice was now looming. Did she dare to message him, a leap into the unknown that could either empower her or pull her back? The clock ticked steadily, and her finger hovered over the screen, uncertainty thrumming beneath her resolve. In that moment, the air crackled with an unshakable intensity. She understood that whatever happened next would redefine her path, deeper than any unair confession, shape the leader she aspired to be. And as doubts faded into the background, she pressed that button to initiate contact. Would this be her moment of liberation, or would old fears come rushing back, colliding with a newfound determination? The potential outcome vibrated in the air, filled with tension and unresolved conflict as she awaited Mark's reply. The faint buzzing of her phone cut through the thick silence, a signal that her message had been delivered. Linda's heart raced as she stared at the screen, waiting for a response that felt monumental in its potential to alter her trajectory. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours, each tick of the clock amplifying her anxieties. Was this how it felt to hang in the balance between two versions of oneself before and after the confrontation? She found herself tapping her fingers rhythmically against the armchair, a futile attempt to soothe the restlessness swirling inside. The silence of the room mirrored the stillness outside, both equally unsettling. Each passing moment threatened to shatter her composure, exposing the vulnerability she had struggled to embrace. Linda shifted her focus inward, diving deeper into the emotional well she had unearthed during her night of reflection. What if Mark's reply invited her back into familiar discomfort? The thought compelled her to confront the lessons she had painstakingly learned. Would she falter in her newfound resolve, or would she stand taller, armed with the clarity she had fought for? A ping from her phone jolted her from her thoughts. The notification flashed the long-anticipated message, and she opened it with trepidation. "We need to talk." The words echoed in her mind, stripping away the courage she had so carefully constructed. She could almost feel the walls closing in, echoing her fears of regression. But there was an undeniable spark of curiosity igniting within her. It was just Mark's choice of words that sent a shiver down her spine. It was the realization that the path ahead was stitched with uncertainty, a thread that could unravel or weave together her story. Taking a deep breath, Linda reflected on the choices she had made to bring her to this point. Each decision, each sacrifice, heralded the emergence of a stronger version of herself, one capable of managing the spectrum of human emotion. Could confronting Mark help to reinforce this growth, or might it threaten to dismantle her progress? Building mental resilience had been her greatest triumph. She hadn't just learned to cope, she had cultivated a mindset that thrived on challenges. Yet the stakes were steep, higher than many rallies she had hosted. This was uncharted territory and opportunity woven into the fabric of personal and professional development. In that moment of petrified anticipation, she tapped out a response, faster than she could second-guess it. "Let us meet tomorrow. I want to talk in person." The message flickered across the screen like a lighthouse in a fog, signaling hope amidst the uncertainty. With that, Linda mentally constructed a framework for the meeting. She would address the past and clearly articulate her boundaries, fortified by the lessons learned in her solitude. This session wouldn't bury her under the weight of nostalgia. It would empower her to reclaim her narrative and sculpt it into one that aligned with her current self. Looking out at the city, now bathed in the light of a new day, she felt a rush of resolve. What had once been a confrontation of fears could be transformed into an exchange laden with clarity and insight. It was not mere closure she sought, but a deep understanding of herself and the choices that had shaped her life. But as the day wore on, the creeping doubt returned. Would Mark understand her evolution? Would he respect the new boundaries she was prepared to lay down? The risk of disillusionment loomed perilously close, but it also sparked a deeper inquiry within her. What did it truly mean to evolve? This was more than a mere meeting. It was a chance to test her development against the person who had once threatened to define her. The fragile balance of anticipation and anxiety tightened as the moment approached. Linda wondered just how much she was willing to reveal and whether the transformation would stand firm against the shadows of her past. What awaited her in that conversation? Would it be a breakthrough, or would it force her to confront more than just Mark? As she readied herself for the next chapter, a single thought pierced through her apprehension. This could reshape everything. The stakes had never been higher. Linda woke with the sun streaming through her window, the light illuminating the thoughts swirling in her head. This was it. Today was the day she confronted her past. She could feel the weight of anticipation sitting heavily on her chest, pushing her to manage anxiety and summon resolve. As she brewed coffee, each measured action felt deliberate, as if crafting a shield against her unease. She poured the steaming liquid into her favorite mug, the one adorned with a motivational quote she had once clung to for inspiration. Its faded letters now served as a reminder of the promises she had made to herself. Today, she would uphold one of those promises, to honor her growth. Her mind wouldn't let her stray far from the thought of Mark. How drastically they had evolved since they last crossed paths. He had been a significant part of her narrative, but now she was no longer the woman who had allowed his choices to dictate her mood or decisions. The struggle between hope and trepidation began to morph into something more resolute. This meeting was not just a passage into the unknown, it could also be a continuation of her journey of empowerment. After a final glance in the mirror, Linda left the apartment, determination crystallizing with each step she took toward the cafe where they were scheduled to meet. The familiar walk became a ritualistic grounding exercise, as she observed the bustling life around her. A street musician played a vibrant tune, inspiring her to reflect on the symphony of her own transformation. Each note felt like a reminder that life was no longer supporting the chaos of her past, but harmonizing with her present. She entered the cafe early, claiming a corner table with a strategic view of the entrance. As the minutes trickled by, the faint aroma of freshly baked pastries offered little comfort. What was she really hoping to gain from this conversation? Closure, understanding, or perhaps just the affirmation that she had made the right choice to invite him back into her life? Her internal dialogue spiraled into a mini panic as options unraveled one by one, leaving the raw truth exposed. She needed to know that her evolution was evident, not just to herself but to Mark as well. The chime of the doorbell heralded Mark's arrival. She had expected a flurry of conflicting emotions, but instead, an unexpected calm washed over her. He approached, tentative yet intrigued, wearing an expression that spoke of regret meshed with uncertainty. "Hey, Linda," he greeted awkwardly, shifting slightly as he took a seat. The way he looked at her brought a mixture of nostalgia and an unspoken challenge. She understood that they were now standing on different ground, each of them equipped with new perspectives ready to dissect their shared history. "Thanks for coming," she replied, her voice steady. This was her moment, and timid was no longer an option. She wanted to speak from a place of strength, revealing the truths she had kept hidden, the emotional armor she had forged in the fires of vulnerability. They exchanged pleasantries, but Linda swiftly pivoted the conversation toward the core of their shared past. "I wanted to talk about what happened between us," she began, her words hanging in the air like a delicate thread that could either snap or bind them. Mark nodded, visibly bracing himself for her introspection. She could sense the walls he had built around himself, a familiar echo returned. Yet, she was ready to confront not only him but also her own hesitations. She had learned to articulate her feelings, and as she spoke, confident in her understanding of the situation, she felt layers of fear begin to peel away. "I've changed, Mark," Linda declared, pausing to gauge his reaction. The raw confession stirred a yearning for mutual acknowledgement, urging her to dig deeper. "And I want to share this journey with you, but it has to be different. I need to feel that my boundaries will be respected." Mark's expression softened, but the uncertainty still lingered in his eyes like muted shadows. "I don't know what you want from me," he responded quietly, his voice laden with conflict. This was a turning point, and Linda could either cower in the face of his hesitation or forge ahead. "I want honesty, Mark. I need you to understand the impact of your actions on who I've become," she urged, revealing the depth of her commitment to herself, a willingness to navigate an exchange that had the potential to shape both their futures. The air between them crackled with tension, the uncharted territory stretching out like a vast horizon, each of them standing on the brink of a transformative moment. Would his admission bridge the gap between their past and the possibility of a new connection, or would they depart in unresolved silence? As the silence thickened, Linda felt her heart racing with a blend of fear and exhilaration. The struggle ahead was undeniable, yet the pursuit of clarity felt like a necessary risk, one that could either fortify her newfound identity or shatter the foundations she had built. She questioned if this encounter would lead them toward illumination or drag them both further into shadows. Resolute, she prepared to listen, ready to unearth the implications of their conversation. Where would this dialogue lead them? In that moment of uncertainty, the stakes surged higher, and she couldn't help but wonder how much more she might uncover about herself in the process. Linda sat facing Mark in the cozy cafe, the warmth of the morning sun glimmering through the window, casting gentle shadows over their table. This dialogue was more than a confrontation. It had become an examination of who she had grown into since their last tumultuous encounter. As he looked at her, she could see the uncertainty mirrored in his eyes, a reflection of the distance between them that had accumulated over the years. "Tell me what you need, Linda." "I'm here," he said softly, his voice tinged with a hint of vulnerability that compelled her resolve. She inhaled deeply, feeling the weight of her choices pressing against her chest. "I need you to understand the effect your actions had on me," she began, her voice steady but unwavering. "When we were together, I lost parts of myself. I let you dictate my emotions, my self-worth. It's taken years for me to rebuild that, and I need to know you recognize that journey." Mark's gaze dropped, and for a moment, regret pooled between them, raw and unguarded. "I never intended that," he responded, a hint of remorse surfacing. "I was struggling too, and I'm sorry if I led you to feel that way." The sincerity in his voice ignited a longing for closure within Linda, something she hadn't realized she needed until this moment. "Understanding is the first step, but we need to do this differently if we're going to move forward at all. I must set boundaries, and they need to be respected. My life is different now." She watched as the realization dawned on him. "You've really changed, haven't you?" he said, a note of admiration threading through his tone. "I can see it, Linda. The confidence, it's palpable." Linda felt pride swell within her. She was not the timid woman he had known. She had transformed into a person who understood her own worth. "It's taken time," she admitted, her voice softer but resonating with strength. "I've learned to value my voice, my experiences. I want to share what I've learned with others, to help them face their struggles." The conversation shifted, It was no longer a mere reflection of the past but rather an exploration of mutual respect and the potential for growth. "I want to support you," Mark said, the sincerity now tangible between them. "I've realized that by helping myself, I can also help those around me. And you, Linda, you've become a beacon of that self-empowerment." Reflection danced behind her thoughts, and she nodded, feeling the lingering connection forged through shared struggles. It was a moment of recognition, one that bridged the gap between who they once were and who they now hoped to become. Looking into Mark's eyes, Linda felt a sense of closure wrapping around her like a soft embrace. The fear of regression that had once loomed large began to dissolve. "We can't erase the past," she stated firmly, "but we can choose to move forward in a way that respects our paths. We can share our stories without losing ourselves in the process." Mark leaned back, absorbing her words, an expression of understanding blossoming on his face. "I'd like that, Linda. I truly would. Let us take the time to figure out how we can be better together or apart." In that exchange, Linda felt the final tether to her past loosen its grip. She had confronted not just Mark, but the version of herself that had felt powerless, uncertain. With every word they shared, she dismantled internal walls, fortifying her foundation of self-respect and clarity. As they parted ways, Linda felt the sun warm her skin, illuminating her path ahead. This was not merely a chapter closed, it was the beginning of a new narrative, one where she wielded her voice with authority and intention. Mark represented a part of her history, but now, she controlled her story moving forward. Walking back to her apartment, the tight knot of anxiety that had accompanied her for so long began to unfurl. She had faced her past and emerged not only unscathed but empowered. She realized that she could foster connections built on understanding and boundaries, an achievement reflective of her growth. Today represented the culmination of her self-discovery, a victory against self-doubt, a testament to her resilience. The journey had been harrowing, but it led her here, to this moment brimming with possibilities. This was her life now, authentic, filled with purpose, and most importantly, recognized. Eager to share this transformative experience with her followers, Linda turned her phone to document her reflections. She wanted to show others the strength found in vulnerability, the power of confronting past shadows. She drafted a post, giving a glimpse not just of her journey but inviting her audience to embrace their paths of healing. As she tapped post, she felt a surge of affirmation ripple through her, a commitment to herself and all who listened. She had stepped into not just a new chapter, but an established narrative of strength, and it was only the beginning. Now was the time to inspire others. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about this powerful ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformative conclusion. Show your support. You need to subscribe now. Don't wait even one more second to share.